Welcome to this week's Movie Math, where Halloween has officially become a Sony holiday. See, while horror films have always been standard fare for this time of year, and sure enough, Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension is set for this coming weekend, Sony instead decided to try and target the family audience, looking to get in some lighthearted scares with not one, but two movies, and scored a lot of cash both times it rung the box office doorbell. Yes, both Hotel Transylvania 2 and Goosebumps are definitely more treat than trick, as each was able to open at #1. And while Goosebumps only posted about half of the Drac Pack's debut, it's well positioned to do strong business until Halloween actually comes around at the end of the month. The Jack Black pick also boasts a lean and mean budget, especially for studio fare, but interestingly, all of this weekend's wide releases were relatively cheap to make. Has Hollywood finally become fiscally responsible? Most of studio financing going to blockbusters and strong competition from TV is definitely resulting in some savvy moves from directors and producers who would, like to keep working. And speaking of continuing to work, Jack Black really did need this win. Besides voicing Po in the Kung Fu Panda franchise, he suffered flop after flop recently, including his first collaboration with his Goosebumps director, Gulliver's Travels. Nacho Libre was the last big starring role for Black, and well, if you saw Nacho Libre, significantly depressed box office does seem like a reasonable reaction to that movie. As for Hotel Transylvania 2, it took its biggest drop yet, with Goosebumps eating into its audience. Yet worldwide, both movies have a ways to go, as they're taking their sweet time going from country to country. Then perhaps the real horror this weekend was Crimson Peak losing out to Bridge of Spies. The Haunted House movie had one Thursday night, and some thought it might turn out to be a surprisingly strong performer. But it seems the flick was incredibly front-loaded, as its numbers began to erode by Friday evening. See, usually Saturday is the big game changer with matinees and families heading to the multiplex. This is Guillermo del Toro's lowest debut since Mimic, and surely Universal's pleas to make the film PG-13 rather than R will haunt del Toro and Legendary for some time to come. What will also likely haunt Legendary is that their creative prowess was recently called into question, with both Warner Brothers and Universal arguing that Legendary is a fabulous film finance company, but not such a great production company. Crimson Peak's box office needed to be evidence of the former, but has turned out to be evidence of the latter. And this has also been a nightmare week for Tom Hiddleston, as not only does box office success continue to elude him outside of his role as Loki, with no news of him resurfacing in the MCU anytime soon, but his awards contender I Saw the Light was just pushed back to spring 2016. Jessica Chastain's hopes of getting more mainstream work are also surely dashed here, while you can also bet that when it comes to promoting Through the Looking Glass, Mia Wasikowska will not be front and center like she was at D23. Now, as for Bridge of Spies, considering the lack of attention paid to the film in the run-up to its release, its third-place debut is a bit of a miracle, and definitely underscores that the Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg combo still has some sway over moviegoers. Well, a certain type of moviegoer, as about 90% of the audience was over 25 and 43% over the age of 50. But Disney hopes that Bridge of Spies will be able to infiltrate the box office for some time, propelled by word of mouth and also perhaps a very strong Rotten Tomatoes score. As the general movie-going audience pays more and more attention to that number, one could argue that Bridge of Spies' score in comparison to Crimson Peak's might have helped more than a few moviegoers on the fence pick a side. Elsewhere in the box office, The Martian dropped about 40%, but merely slipped to second place, boasting a worldwide total of over $300 million, and it still has to hit China and Japan. Speaking of China, Ant-Man finally opened there and did ironically big business, boasting the second biggest opening ever for a Marvel movie after Avengers: Age of Ultron. And with over $450 million now, it's busted both Captain America and Thor's first flicks. No wonder Feige gifted it a sequel. But if Ant-Man, starring Paul Rudd, can do such big business, that just puts even more pressure on Doctor Strange, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel to perform. Then back to this weekend's box office, Pan suffered the biggest drop in the top 10, over 60%, in just its second weekend. The $150 million pick, not including advertising, is expected to be that big a loss for Warner Brothers. And what do you know? Another faith-based film popped up into the top 10, Woodlawn. So far, independent distributors and production companies are making these movies, making one wonder if the idea of producing a faith-based movie is so abhorrent to the big studios that they're willing to turn away from all the money that seems to be on the table. Then in the specialty market, incredible buzz for Room propelled it to a very solid debut, while nobody seemed to care about Dan Rather's Truth. And only Netflix knows if anyone really watched Beasts of No Nation this weekend, as the fiercely private company can't keep the film's box office numbers a secret, which they probably wish they could considering its extremely poor debut. In fact, if the streaming numbers are even decent, they might want to consider releasing them to counteract what's surely a bucket of cold water on Beasts award prospects. As for Steve Jobs, it expanded to 60 theaters and found itself knocking on the top 10's door. It will be interesting to see how it performs this coming weekend when it finally goes wide, especially because this coming weekend is oh so very crowded. The Last Witch Hunter is expected to be the strongest new contender, while Gem and the Holograms and Rock the Kasbah will also look to carve out a niche for themselves. Suffragette and Burnt will also open, but in just 4 theaters each. And that's the weekend box office. I'm Grace Randolph, and we just did some movie math. As always, thanks for watching. And I hope you'll go beyond the trailer for these other top movies.